Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us at 10 a.m. on a Sunday. It feels incredibly early, but thank you for being here. Thank you to our panel, who I'm going to introduce with a little bio each. We have Nicky Greenwall, Alistair Mackay, and Zibu Sithole. Let me show you their books before I even do introductions. So Zibu Sithole has written a second novel, I Do, Don't I? Alistair Mackay, The Child, this is his second novel. And Nicky Greenwall, her first novel, A Short Life. So I'm just going to do some bios, and then we're going to get into the really good discussion. Okay. I'm mixing my media. I had tech issues this week, so. Okay, so let me start with Alistair. Alistair Mackay is a South African writer interested in exploring queerness, marginalization, social justice, and climate change. He holds an MFA in creative writing from Columbia University and an MA in politics from Edinburgh University. For many years, Alistair worked in a marketing strategy consultancy and survived exactly 1 year in political communications.
It's a long time.
His short fiction has been published in Commonwealth Writers' Adam magazine, Brittle Paper, New Contrast, the Kalahari Review, Kabaka magazine, and Penny, as well as in the anthologies Queer Africa 2, The Other, and Queer Africa Selected Stories. His debut novel, It Doesn't Have to Be This Way, which was a wonderful novel,
Thank you,
was published in 2022. His most recent novel, The Child, also a wonderful novel, was published in April 2024. So the other thing, I try not to have a very stiff panel because everybody's a little bit nervous. It's 10 a.m., so please do feel free to interrupt and to speak, not you. Now, if there's something really pressing, you can put your hand up but let's not be too formal about it, so you can ask each other questions if you like. Nicky Greenwall, I think we know Nicky Greenwall's face, is a well-known producer, entertainment journalist, and former TV presenter, best known for the hit television shows The Showbiz Report, The Close-Up, Screen Time, and more recently the multi-award nominated documentary series, The Beautiful People. As a print journalist, Nicky has contributed to Elle, Marie Claire, Men's Health, Glamour, Good Taste, and The Sunday Times. She has conducted one-on-one interviews with a host of Hollywood stars, including Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Jim Carrey, Idris Elba, Charlize Theron, Emma Thompson, Johnny Depp, Angelina Jolie, Naomi Campbell, Hugh Grant, and Sir Anthony Hopkins, to name a few. A Short Life, set to be released in July 2024, is Nicky's debut novel, and she lives in Cape Town. Zibu Sithole lives in Johannesburg with a son. She's a journalist with more than 10 years of experience writing for television and radio, as well as print and digital media. She's a published ghostwriter of many romance novels. The Thing with Zola is Zibu's first novel published under her own name. The series continues with the addition of I Do, Don't I? So please, a small round of applause for our panel. So it was quite interesting because each of these three books is really very different from the other. Although what kind of united it, I think, according to the program directors here, is that each novel does speak about some level of privilege. The characters are all very privileged individuals. But I wasn't entirely comfortable with that framing because, to be frank, to write in South Africa is a very privileged position. And so I wanted to also ask it from a different point of view. I wanted to speak about my apologies. I wanted to speak about writerly privilege in the sense that, is it a privilege, and this is just one question I want to ask each of you, and then we're going to have a discussion about the books. Do you consider it a privilege to write in South Africa? Or is it something of a dubious privilege because it is notoriously hard to get published? It is hard to sell books. It's hard to, we have a very small reading buying market audience, which I'm not sure if it's expanding or contracting. I think the last time I heard it was in fact contracting our market. So, is it a privilege? Is it a labor of love? I'd really love to hear each of your opinions on that. Alistair, let's start with you again.
Sure. So I think it's a bit of both. It's definitely a privilege for me. It's also the kind of thing, I know people love to say this, writers love to say this, but I think I would go mad if I wasn't able to write. So for me, it's sort of an imperative. It's definitely a privilege to be able to get published. It's been a lifelong dream of mine to have my book in people's hands, and the feeling you get when a reader comes up to you and speaks to you about a book that has moved them, or something that has spoken to them, or they've resonated with in something you've written, is just one of the best highs I've ever experienced. So that is a huge privilege for me. I think because South Africa is such a divided, unequal place, I think the responsibility that comes with that, in my writing anyway, is that I try not to just show one side of the sort of privileged spectrum in my work, and to try and show the full spectrum, and to sort of, I think books should be helping to open our eyes to the world that we're in, and not just focus on one type of storyline, but to show varied types of lives in South Africa. Yeah.
Don't preempt the discussion, Alistair.
Okay, sorry.
You've obviously written many other books before this one. This one is under your own name. But you're still doing it, so I'd imagine, in fact, it's more of a risk to do it under your own name, because now the risk is your own financial time and so on. So is it a privilege?
It's definitely a privilege to be able to tell the stories of one of the most marginalized people in South Africa. I am a black woman. We are the lowest paid group. We suffer the most abuse and all of that. And to be able to sit on panels and speak and tell stories that tell people about our lives outside of news headlines is a great privilege. It's a huge privilege and a massive responsibility.
I think that was a lovely answer. Nicky, you get to follow up.
I think it's more than a privilege. I think it's a luxury, to be honest. I think, my publisher told me that, South African fiction doesn't sell very well in this country. Non-fiction sells incredibly well, and South African fiction comparatively doesn't sell as well. And
I think 2,000 books
yeah.
is a bestseller in South Africa.
Yeah, 2,000 for fiction,
yeah.
And for non-fiction books will sell 25 to 30,000 copies written by South African authors.
Unless you worked for Eskom and you sold 100,000.
Or that, exactly. So I do feel like it's a luxury, because it's hard to make a living from writing. I imagine, this is only my first book, but I imagine from the horror stories that I've heard, that it's hard to make a living. And there's a quote that I often cite from a guy called Joe Moran. I don't know if you've read his work, but he wrote this book called First You Write a Sentence. And in it he says, to write so that someone may read voluntarily and for pleasure is the work of a lifetime. And that's always struck me as such an amazing, it's true, just for somebody to want to read something you've written is a massive privilege. So you just hope at that point, when they make that decision, that you've got something worthy of saying.
No, this is a lot, because I've been on panels where we have bitched and complained about what an awful thing it is to be a writer. So I'm delighted that we're starting Sunday properly.
It is also emotional torture, but it's still a privilege to get to do it.
No closure?
No closure?
Yeah, I'm asking, do you get closure? No sense of... catharsis?
A little bit, I suppose.
You
process some stuff, you figure out what you feel about things, you figure out what you think about things in the process of doing it. So
I want to talk about every single book, but just quickly, are you addicted to the... okay, that's the wrong word. Sunday morning. Is it the process of writing that you are most engaged with, that you have to keep writing? Because that's what Alistair said. He has to write. You have to write?
I do have to write, whether it's going to be published or not. I've always written. So to now write and have people read it is absolutely wonderful, because I was going to do it anyway.
But unnecessary. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, Zibu, I do want to start off. I don't want to categorize what the book is, but it is a romance novel. I think it's called a romance, so we're going to leave it at that. So the aspect of privilege that I think I've been asked to speak on really is the fact that all the characters are wealthy in South Africa across all three books. And so that's the one principle I think that kind of unifies these books, but they are all extremely different. And what was most clear to me, though, was that they all live very, very messy lives. And Zibu, I think you outlined that extremely well with Mbali's family. So Mbali's the main character, the male in the book, and his family is incredibly messy. And could you read, and then I would like to ask you a question afterwards.
Okay. Mbali was now severely late for his Friday evening meeting, but he dialed Zola's number again. At least it was ringing instead of going straight to voicemail. But she was either rejecting his calls or he'd left so many messages in the last 5 minutes that her voicemail box was full. "She'll come back to you when she's done crying," Ongama said. She was sitting on the love seat with her legs stretched out on the couch in front of her, tossing prawn puffs into her mouth while she watched TV. A woman on the screen had thrown herself on the ground crying because her husband had introduced a second wife. "It's always these broke men that can't look after the wife they have," she said, clicking her tongue. Mbali knew what she meant, but he didn't miss the irony of his mother's comment. While his father clearly had never looked after Ongama's emotional needs, Elias had looked after his mother financially, even now that she had moved out of her marital home. And Ongama didn't think twice about spending Elias's money on herself. "Mama, I'm in a hurry. I'm on my way to a meeting, but what exactly did you do to Zola?" Given what he'd seen in the lift, he would have thought Ongama would volunteer the information or that Zola would answer her phone. Neither of these things had happened. "Why do you think I did anything to Zola? Why don't you ever consider that you are the one who did something to her?" Ongama said, increasing the volume on the TV. The woman on the screen was wailing again, while the man was insisting the second wife would make everyone's life better. Mbali went to stand in front of the TV so his mother couldn't ignore him. "Mama, you must have said something to upset her." Ongama raised her eyes to Mbali's face and kissed her teeth, unmoved by his concern. "I think this girl just likes being chased. You spoiled her by chasing her through an airport. Now she wants you to run after her all the time," Ongama said irritably. Mbali could tell she was guilty. She'd messed up and was shifting the blame. "Mama," Mbali turned off the TV, which was practically a declaration of war. Ongama stood up. "So now, all we're going to talk about is Zola and her crocodile tears." She strode purposefully to the kitchen for no apparent reason. "I just told that girl the truth. And you only being concerned about her after she's on the 5th taxi to God knows where probably shows that I was right." Mbali didn't get it. He knew his mother was speaking about Zola, but the pretense confused him. His mother was in a cryptic mood, and he didn't have time for this. He knew there were a million things his mother could say to upset Zola, and that even the sight of Ongama in his apartment could have upset her. He'd never mentioned his new roommate, and he had his reasons. But from where Zola stood, the omission would be as good as a lie.
Yeah, I think that's good. Thank you so much. So there are... It's a very fun book in many ways because there's quite a lot that happens, which we don't like to speak about, but I'm coming to that later. But just tell me about the development of those characters, especially Mbali's parents, and kind of why you wrote them in the way that you did. And did they serve the purpose of being kind of like a comic foil at some point? I'm just curious in terms of your writerly process, why you used them and how you developed them.
So Mbali's parents are part of South Africa's political elite. They were involved in politics, and as a result, they now benefit from all the tenders and get to live a lavish life. But in building that life, they emotionally neglected their son and their marriage. And now Elias, like many men stereotypically, men who live a life like his, is now interested in younger women. And he's got the money to attract these women who come to him not for love, but to kind of get some of the privileges he has, be at the restaurants, wear the nice clothes, live
well, the
a
nice
lavish
clothes
life.
being skinny jeans with a paunch that falls over it.
Yes, ripped up skinny jeans at 60, and that's Elias for you. And he is now looking to get a second wife, and the first wife is holding on to the marriage simply to hold on to the privilege. because privilege has taken over their lives in such a way that it eclipses everything. You know, you are in a marriage where you are being disrespected, but the privilege allows you to disrespect the less privileged people, so you're okay with that. The way Ongama speaks about Mbali's girlfriend, Zola, who is a
Working
girl from an
class?
average home in
Average,
the township.
yeah.
And she looks down on her. She doesn't like Zola for her son at all. And coming from a really messed up marriage, she feels that having money gives her the power, the ability to be a judge of relationships, because that's how money is, right? It gives you status. It makes you seem intelligent. You're an expert at everything because you've got money. Money is, unfortunately, power, and that is...
And so you felt like when you were drawing these characters, this was a reasonably fair portrayal of a certain sector
Yes.
in South Africa?
It is...
It's quite damning. I mean, it's not a good portrait.
It is, but we see it a lot in South Africa's political elite. The way people feel okay saying the most ridiculous things in the news. We have our politicians telling us we don't deserve this because they have it. We don't deserve basic needs. And Mbali's parents are a representation of those people. And they're cast in a comical light because the way they've behaved, I feel like it's okay to laugh at them.
Yeah, well, the image of the jeans, and I mean,
But we've seen it. We've all seen it.
I've seen a lot worse. Talking about characters, Nicky, I want you to read, and then just the lead up to your reading, is that Cape Town really is a character in your book. Also very interesting, a lovely book, which, is it fair to call it a crime thriller? You needn't feel, okay, let's not go there. But Cape Town is often featured quite filmically, wide-angled shots, there are pans, there are zoom-ins. And so I want to hear a little bit about trying to capture, really, I think fairly, one of the most beautiful cities I've ever lived in. Capturing that city on the page, which I think you do really well, and turning the city into one of the main characters. So read, and then let's speak a bit about that.
Friday on Constantinek Road. A red-rimmed moon is our searchlight. From my vantage point, the car reminds me of a scarab that has landed on its back. Unlike the creature of my imagination, this car doesn't struggle to right itself. It is resigned to the inevitable. It lies where the foot of the forest meets the bottom of a steep verge, motionless except for a faint plume of smoke curling from beneath the body. Nocturnal insects throb. The southeaster moves through the poplars and the blue gums above. Clouds shift. Every so often there's a passing car, not slowing down. Twin red lights disappear quickly behind the curve of the mountain. I know it's too dark to see much at that speed unless you were looking for someone at the side of the road, like we were. He can't be in there, says Nick, cutting the engine. My free hand opens the passenger door. Nick's movements mirror mine. The Jeep's doors slam shut with a synchronized thud. I make my way behind the Jeep towards my mother's parked Mercedes. She was here first, called at my request. Her burgundy relic is parked on the shoulder, a painted fingernail marking the spot. As I reach for her passenger door, I turn back to see Nick sliding down the incline towards the wreckage. Moonlight picks out the silver in his hair as he maneuvers past the roots and rocks. He will be disappointed to get his shoes dirty. I feel certain I hear a siren up ahead, but it could be the wind or a peacock. Jesus, my mother says, reaching over to release the bygone mechanism of her passenger door. Her windows are the kind that wind down by hand. How long have you been here? I say, sinking into the wrinkled hide of her passenger seat. Her hand is cold and papery. About 5 minutes. I left as soon as you called. Mom, I'm so sorry to involve you. I can't go and look. I thought I could, but I can't. I'd taken my mother's outfit, cardigan over her pajamas, gardening shoes still caked in mud. I think we should call the police, I say. I've just done that. Tilt of the chin, flick of grey gold fringe communicate. I'm not an idiot, you know. She wraps her cardigan tighter around herself. I shouldn't have called you, Mom. I'm sorry. I thought he called you, didn't he? He must be all right. Her eyes are their deepest hue when she's worried, inexplicably paler when she's angry. Before I'm able to make the distinction, the car's interior lights fade to black as if marking the end of a scene. "Where are the police?" she says. I'm all but silent, grinding a thumbnail between my teeth. My husband will know what to do. My mother's soliloquy continues. Why didn't he call his wife first? I strain my ears to listen for the sirens I was so sure I could hear before. Surely she's building up for a lecture, as certain of her opinion as one should be after 60, but her words dissolve in the air as our eardrums accept the sound of a car starting, wheels moving at speed. The Jeep, Nick's car, is skidding forwards into the darkness, already gone. Where on earth is he going, she says, flicking her brights, illuminating nothing. Mum, my voice escapes my throat at an odd angle. The sirens are real now. I can hear them, can imagine their blue and red glow. We need to go, Mum. Shouldn't we? Just go. She turns the key and slams her mud-caked foot on the accelerator. The wheels make a grinding sound as we leave the soil of the verge for the smoothness of the road.
So was it a challenge trying to write Cape Town? I mean, the book traverses many beautiful parts of Cape Town, Llandudno, Constantia, Newlands.
Around the mountain.
Around the mountain.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about writing the city. You know, was there a process? Did you drive around the city many times? You take it from you. I'm just curious why did you make Cape Town a character?
Well, one of the things that, and I do sort of mention this a little bit in the book, is that so I, as you know, used to work in the advertising industry, and now I work in the fashion industry, and a lot of commercials are shot in Cape Town in the summer season, and Cape Town is meant to be a stand-in for other places, and I found that having been exposed to that my whole life, my whole working life, I always find that such an interesting part of Cape Town specifically, that you can be in so many different places at once, and that's very unique to where we live. So, you know, just a 5-minute drive, you're on the beach. A 5-minute drive, you're in the mountain. A 5-minute drive, you're in a forest. You're in these different locations.
Although it feels like 30 minutes. But
Well, just specifically around the mountain, you know, there's so many different vistas, and I don't know. There's something in the fact that Cape Town is mimicking other places. There's just something intriguing about that for me, that you can watch a car commercial that's supposed to be the Algarve, and you go, wait a minute, that's Chapman's Peak. And there's something interesting about that we are who we are, but what does that identity mean? That we're constantly changing shape and constantly being a stand-in for somewhere else. So I was very interested in that aspect, and I tried to capture that in the story.
I mean that's a really interesting perspective. I did not think of it the way you just said it, because it's true, we do. And I mean, I think quite a few movies have also now been shot on the other side, like in Boekap.
Yes, exactly.
Not just Dion Mayer's book, but there was an international book with Denzel Washington as well. That was so. I mean, there's a lot of different, you know. So there's a favela kind of aspect, not Boekap, but just you, Alistair, and I'm going to ask you to read as well, but Cape Town I felt like Cape Town was also a character, but a bit less pretty in your novel, because I think really Cape Town is more of a backdrop, though it is there, and kind of what rises is the tension between race and class and culture. And so I found one of the strengths of this work to be that there was a lot of unsayable things that were in fact said, you know, the kind of processing you do when you walk into a room. And, you know, I always do like a quick assessment, like how do they see me? You know, it happens to me all the time. I live in Newlands, so I'm very aware of the privilege that I have. And I'm sometimes mistaken. It happened 2 weeks ago. I was entering my property that I was the person coming to clean. And so, you know, it happens, and you're always doing that assessment. I don't care. I mean, I've long ago felt like your opinion of me is your business. I don't at all take that on, that kind of, you know, racial politics. But you do speak about those things, that kind of, you know, mental thing that we're always doing, where we're assessing how... I mean, it's different for a woman of color, I think, different for a black African woman, how we expect to be perceived. But you talk about that. And it's pretty unsayable, really. So why and how and Did you feel courageous? Did your publisher say, Alistair, this is going too far?
I think it helps to have an anxiety disorder. So those voices are just always going on in my head anyway, and I'm always second guessing everything and trying to read into everybody's expressions and assuming the worst. And so I was trying to convey that feeling and that sort of psyche in the book. And I did try. Courageous is a very nice thing to hear. Thank you. I
By the way,
try
you
to
have
be
to
as
read
like,
as well.
honest
Hey?
as
You have
sure.
to read and then continue the answer.
All right, sure.
Sorry.
Okay. This is from fairly early on in the book. The main character and his husband have just returned to Cape Town from New York, where they were living for a few years, working in the advertising industry. Cape Town looks dry from the plane. I try to point this out to Adrian beside me, but I'm conscious of speaking very slowly and slurring my words. I'm heavily sedated with beta blockers and sleeping pills and booze, some homeopathic calming chews as well. I take combinations that are not recommended in doses that are not recommended. A delicate balance, not so much that I'll kill myself, but enough to keep the plane whole, to stop the engines from exploding and engulfing us all in flames as we plummet to the earth. Enough to unclench my jaw, to keep my teeth from shattering in my mouth. It looks like the Middle East, I say, avoiding the term aerial footage, which comes to mind, but would prove difficult for my tongue in this woozy fog. You've never been, Adrian says and smiles at me. I wave away his dart. Things are worse than I realized. The vegetation is dead, the mountains are brown, the sky a terrible grayish white, like sun-bleached bones. There are notices all over the airport about the drought. A countdown clock measures the days until the city runs out of water. The taps have been switched off in the airport public toilets. Little blue bottles of waterless hand sanitizer wait by the basins. I read apocalyptic predictions in our Uber on our way into the city. CNN, BBC, The Guardian, The New York Times. We're all over the global press. Mixed in with the dread and the exhaustion that follows the adrenaline when we touch down on solid ground is a strange sense of accomplishment. The world is paying attention to our crisis, our ignored continent where no one cares what happens, where tragedy is supposed to be part of the brand. This time, we're a canary in the coal mine. This climate chaos is coming for you, these articles imply, and so this African suffering matters. It's a strange time to move home, the Uber driver says to me. Cape Town's in trouble. He's Zimbabwean, I'd guess, from his accent and the music playing on his sound system. How's it been, I say. You'll see, you get used to it. The politicians say they'll call in the army when they switch off the taps. Shacks glide past my windows. Slums stretch to the distant mountains, sheet metal, canvas, cinder block, wooden crating, homes built from anything that can be found, packed close together, holding one another up. Emaciated goats search in vain for grass along the concrete fence that keeps these settlements from spilling over onto the verge, where children play soccer in the sand. We pass beneath a pedestrian bridge encased in steel mesh like a long metal cage. It used to be a problem, I remember, people on bridges throwing bricks onto the freeway below, shattering the windscreens of cars racing to the airport. All those passengers bound for Europe and America and Asia, for gap years and ski holidays and shareholder meetings, honeymoons and cheeky little getaways. Decided to treat myself, they'd caption, posting to Instagram from the departures lounge. Or time for a little adventure, why not? I can see why they need the metal cage. Why did you move home, the driver says. It sounds like a real question, warm and interested, not an accusation of madness. How could anyone choose this? They're usually white, the people who inflect it like that, and I tell myself they're usually older than me too. He wants to have a child, Adrian says from behind me. I catch his eye in the rearview mirror and hold his gaze for what feels like minutes. 8 years together and I still cannot read this expression of his. His hazel eyes are green in this light and intense. Does he hold it against me that our time in New York was cut short, or is he trying to protect me? The driver glances between Adrian and me, aware that something is going unsaid. Hey, you guys are funny, he says. Normally the white people who talk about kids are the ones who want to leave. I laugh and shake my head in a way that I hope conveys we're not those kinds of white people. That's amazing, man, the driver says, genuinely delighted. Congratulations. So your girlfriend is pregnant? I try to catch Adrian's eye again, but he's looking out of the window. I'm going to adopt, I say. Whatever the reason Adrian says he instead of we, it's easier just to go along with it. It's tiring to have to surprise taxi drivers with our sexuality and with our marriage. We both probably seem pretty straight right now. It was something I was proud of once. To be gay and ordinary seemed revolutionary when I was younger. Proof that I wasn't despicable and effeminate, showy or bitchy or shallow. Now it just makes me sad that I got so good at passing. I don't even remember what parts of myself I cauterized. You know, children are a lot of work, the driver says to me, laughing and shaking his head. Too much work for one person. You must meet a nice girl. I know plenty of nice girls, I say, trying to sound lighthearted and non-committal, and maybe like one of the boys.
Lots of things which felt unsayable to me. I'm just go back to your previous answer, though, and we'll unpack a little bit more in the next question.
Yeah.
About writing that, processing that silent, deadly racial profiling, which as South Africans or maybe citizens anywhere in the world, we just do constantly, and we're not even writing about it.
Yeah, I really wanted with this novel. So my previous novel, I tried various different perspectives, and there were storylines in I think four different perspectives. Some of which were black people, some of which were white people, some were women, some were men. In this book, I really wanted to explore this idea of sort of being trapped in our own consciousness and how alienating that can be sometimes. And so you only ever get the one person's perspective. And I really wanted to try and delve into the things that we don't normally say, the things that we think, the feelings that we experience that usually we don't bring up in conversation because they're too awkward. And so there was something quite, I don't know if cathartic is the right word, but sort of leaning into some of the most awkward impulses that we have, or most awkward thoughts that we have, and trying to be really unflinching in writing about that stuff. Because I think even though we don't talk about it often, I think a lot of people relate to it, and there's something quite maybe healing in seeing it and recognizing that in something else. All of the uncertainty that we always feel, or reading the room, or the awkward racial tension or dynamics, because everybody is aware of it.
We're doing it all the time, but we pretend like we're not.
Yes, exactly.
Which made it really, you know, I think that was the power of it for me. But I also, so I want to just stay with Alistair a little bit, and then I'm going to come back around. But I think what was also, I mean, there were a lot of things in here which were big, heavy, weighty subjects, gay identity, or just being gay. I don't know if it's, you know. But I think even in the clip that you read, how you wanted to be perceived as a gay person. But then also mental health issues. Again, something which we don't really speak about, but I think probably in 2024, we all know someone, or we all live with someone, or we all see it very regularly. I mean, you know, I don't know if there's a mental health crisis or if this is just the earth as it is now, but it's kind of everywhere. And again, it's not something that you necessarily read that much about. It also feels quite veiled. So these were some really heavy things, but I also just want you to speak about the fact that these mental health crises, they manifest differently depending on race and culture and class. And so you do also kind of go into that with the main character's cleaning lady. How do you refer to her? Housekeeper, domestic worker? What's your chosen term?
Let's go with housekeeper.
That's in the novel, right?
It's in the novel,
Exactly,
So just speak about how, you know, how different, how mental health crises manifest. And again, it's those privilege, lines of privilege as well, I think, perhaps.
Sure. So mental health is a big theme in the book, and the main character is having a bit of a crisis. I think there is actually a mental health crisis in the world at the moment. I suppose the news is very depressing these days, and with climate change and the rise of the right and all of that stuff, I think a lot of people have anxiety disorders. The main character, when the book starts, he has actually just suffered from a mental breakdown, and that's why he lost his job in New York. And so parts of the book go into therapy sessions, and he speaks in therapy, and that's where you see more of his childhood and more of his unprocessed stuff from his childhood. But even as he's trying to work through his own stuff and to try and heal himself, it also, I think there's a way in which mental health can also make us quite myopic and quite selfish, not intentionally selfish, but he's trying to work on himself and he's trying to heal himself, and then he gets glimpses into Sibs, his cleaner's life, and she's also going through a crisis. And he's sort of very surprised when she wants to speak to him about it, and he's caught off guard by it, and he doesn't feel like he's capable of supporting her through that, and he tries to listen, but he doesn't feel like he has the tools. Sorry, I think was that even an answer to your question?
No, that was in a way, and I had another question which I've now forgotten. Go back, what were you saying? Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I'm going to move on.
Okay.
I had a question in relation to what you were saying, and let's call it age. I'm going to move on to Zibu. So I'm going to try and keep about 10 to 15 minutes for questions if there are. But I do kind of like to pack in the middle of a session the heavier stuff, and then I try to, leave us with some sense of joy about reading and these books, because there is a lot of joy as well. So I want to also move on to Zibu. This is not your first romance, right? So you have written other romance novels, not under your own name. So I find that fantastic, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about whether you took more chances with your own name on the book. There's some lovely sex scenes, which I really enjoyed, and you could have read one of those. And so I just want to speak about the power of romance novels. I also looked at your Goodreads. I looked at all of your Goodreads reviews, and Zibu gets the most joyous Goodreads. It's a beach read, it's a group read, just lovely. Alistair gets a mixed bag, but we'll come to that later. But I mean, it does also reflect the kind of thing that we want to read at a different stage of our lives, or at maybe different people, which is also fine. Books have many different functions. And so I just want to hear a little bit about, did you take more risks writing this romance under your own name? And I'm also just curious about the other romances you wrote, if you just speak to that, your life as a writer.
So we say romance, but really it's a euphemism. It's erotica. So
you could read us a little piece of it if you wanted, but talk a bit more.
On a Sunday morning.
Yeah, on a Sunday morning. Exactly, on a Sunday morning.
So you asked about the power of romance, kind of, And my books are romantic comedies, which is the softest way to get a point across, because there are topics in how we relate to each other and all of that, but we laugh at it. So we see how we treat each other badly, how difficult unemployment is in South Africa, how irritating and inconvenient load shedding is, while we're laughing at the comedy of falling in love, which is really how we live our lives. We have issues, but life is not about issues. We don't live our issues. We have Zola living in the township, and what I was extremely conscious about is not making the township a place of suffering, because we make the mistake so often when we talk about the township, when we talk about people's living conditions, to make that their entire personality. Because I live in the township myself, but I don't consider myself poverty-stricken and suffering, which is what we think the township is, moving in our Lani circles. We're like, oh goodness, the people suffering in the township. When there are people like me and you who are living their lives, spending their weekends at restaurants, and I wanted to get that through in my books. I wanted to have real characters living real lives, because we don't all have the privilege, again, of being able to interact on that level, being able to speak and see people's lives as they are. We're only exposed to such a small fraction of people's lives. We meet here, we're talking about books. We don't know your struggles and your joys and all of that. And I wanted to get that across in a way that is relatable, that everyone can relate to. And I feel like love is the perfect vehicle for that.
And tell us a bit more about the erotica that you write. And what is the inspiration for your editor? Where do you do research? How does that go?
So erotica is a really interesting genre, because it's not straight up sex, although the stories are about sex. The storyline is driven by, and then they bang. It's not, there's very little substance, but it's, it's very broad in that people don't want to just hear about two people banging. They want to hear about the werewolf that fell in love with the vampire and, scratched his back with her talons.
I believe there is a whole genre of, then there's a furry genre, and there's there are different genres of erotic, and I did have a really long burst of Mills and Boons like 40 years ago, but that was where it stopped for me. There are
But with
multiple
access
genres
and
now.
the internet,
Yeah.
things have become so much more intense. Mills and Boons is lightweight now. People want
Not
more
when you're 8 years
detail.
old, it's not lightweight, let me tell you.
When you're 8 years old, it's illegal.
Things I learned.
But I think access to so many sources of information have made reading and getting entertainment through books and reading things online and all of that so much better. So it's such a rich experience now.
So you're saying that your research is secondary online experience? I'm sorry.
I mean, I haven't
I'm being
scratched the
wicked.
back of a vampire with my werewolf talons yet. So
Yes. Okay. Nikki, it's a strange thing when you have to talk to 3 authors, because I know that conversation feels like it was just beginning, but you can have that conversation separately afterwards. But I do have to give equal time to each. So, okay, you said let's not call it crime fiction. But what was interesting was that
You can call it whatever you want.
Okay. No, I like that. I prefer that as well. But there is a crime. In fact, there are a few crimes. What I found really interesting was that you had so many protagonists, though. And I'll talk about first person afterwards. But and just by the way, I also read your Goodreads view. And this was one of it. It was Greenwall knows how to cliffhang, when to delve deeper, and when to reveal secrets. And so there were lots of little cliffhangers,
You're
lots
not
of
supposed to read
protagonists.
Goodreads, you know that.
Well, you may not, but I certainly do.
Excessively. Me too.
And so I'm just
Scary
curious
space.
what made it doesn't fit into any kind. It was quite interesting that you had all these protagonists, that you did it in the first person. And so you had these different perspectives constantly happening of the same scene. So I'm just curious why you chose, it's quite a complex structure that you used, why you chose that structure, how you came to it, and how you worked, to get the novel to where it was, how you revised your process.
Well, thank you for phrasing it like that, because at one discussion I did, a woman said, why would you write a book where it looked like it'd been bound incorrectly? All the pages mixed up. I was like, oh, okay. I don't know the answer to that. I just wanted each chapter to feel like a little bit of a short story. And I didn't know how it was going to end. When I started writing it, I just knew what I wanted people to feel. And I often cite Rumaan Alam as this writer that I really admire. And I feel like he's cleaved a new pathway for authors, because the genre... I don't know if you guys read Leave the World Behind. The movie came out on Netflix, and the movie wasn't as good, in my humble opinion, as the book. It is true. But the book was amazing because it was this propulsive thriller, and you wanted to know what was going to happen. But then at the end, it was just this massive philosophical punch in the gut. And I loved that combination. And I was trying to sort of create a mood and a feeling and a vibe that you'd feel afterwards, like some sort of connection with the characters. But at the same time, still want to keep reading and find out what happens,
But why, authors, why did you write in the first person, which is so much harder? So I want to ask both of you that, and then I'll come back to you, Zibu. But writing in the first person, I find it to be quite challenging, because it feels like there's no veil between the author and the reader. I mean, obviously there is, because you're obviously assuming a different identity when you're writing, if you're writing fiction. But nonetheless, it feels like quite a vulnerable state, in which it feels like a vulnerable medium. And you both chose it, and it's very difficult. I mean, I started a new novel about however long ago, and I started writing in the first person, and after a bit of time, there's no way I can write a novel. I have written in the first person, but it reveals so much. It feels like you're putting yourself on the page. So I'm curious why and how you came to that. And then you as well, Alistair.
Sure. So I was lucky in that I started writing The Child before my first book came out. So I didn't know what I was in for. I wasn't anticipating how terrifying it would feel knowing that people are going to read this book. And then by the time my first book came out, I was already halfway through this. So I wanted to carry on with it. I think I really like reading first-person narratives. I really like reading memoirs, actually. And I think there's something about the form that lets you explore an inner life in a way that I wasn't able to fully do in the third person, because I wanted to follow all those thoughts that you were mentioning earlier, all the things we think but don't say. It's quite hard to do that if you're not in the first person, because I suppose you can explore the thoughts of third-person narratives as well, but it's not as intimate. It feels intimate, and it does feel very vulnerable and very scary. So I guess it's just a question of then, which is why I couldn't write an actual memoir, I think. So even though it's in a first-person narrative, then there are a lot of things introduced in the plot and characters introduced in this book that have no bearing on my life, that are not from my life, just so that I can get the necessary distance, so I didn't feel overly exposed, I guess.
And you, Nicky? Had you thought it through?
I thought it through now with my second book, interestingly, because this one, it was about immediacy. And I think first person gives, if you're writing suspense, you get immediacy from writing in the first person. And then writing the multiple characters, when you write them in the first person, it forces you to try and understand their interiority. So you have to interrogate. You can't just write on the surface. You have to go really into what they're thinking and to try and differentiate the characters when it's all I, is challenging. And I don't know if I actually achieved it. It's probably just all a smush of me. But now with the second book that I'm writing, third. Yes, thank you. First one, let's not speak of that. The third one that I'm writing is...
Oh, no, I mean third person, but now we know there is an unpublished book.
I've spoken about it many times. It was only Catriona knows about that one. But yeah, so the one that I'm writing now is about an entertainment journalist working at the Cannes Film Festival and a murder that happens at the Cannes Film Festival. So it's quite obviously me. And when I started writing it in the first person, it felt very uncomfortable. It was very ooh, just feels like a biography, and it's not. It's just, it's totally made up story. It just happens to draw. I think it's more like autofiction. And then I made a very conscious decision that this needs to be in the third person. And as soon as I changed to the third person, it flowed, because I wasn't scared of well, this is what I think, Whereas with this one, with A Short Life, it was more about immediacy, and I was ventriloquizing, is that a word? Many different people.
We get you.
Yeah, it felt like the right move, but who knows if it was.
I have left a short period. If there are any questions, best you ask now. Yes. Hi.
Can everyone hear me?
Can I just get a show of hands if there are any others, so I can see 1, 2, 3. Oh my word, I'm sorry I left such a short amount of time. It was a small room, so I thought I shouldn't. Let's go.
I'll try to be as quick as possible. Thank you, guys. I more and more I think of fiction writers as true heroes and people defying our time in some way, because the way the attention economy works today is that we're constantly exploited for our attention. There's a fundamental level of disrespect in our media economy, where essentially our eyes are treated as like a given, and we have to be grabbed and held to pay attention to. Anyone who writes fiction at some level is far more respectful and is far more, caring about what someone gets. So do you feel in some way that by writing you're defying something of the landscape or the world we live in, or is it about just finding the readers who are there, or that do you write fiction? We've talked a lot about the need to write fiction and that, but when you are writing, are you trying to kind of give something back to people's attention span or that kind of thing? I know that might be a pretentious way of saying it, but I do think about that in my writing.
That was lovely and actually very moving, I have to tell you. Thank you for that. Because, I'll let one of you answer. Just one, please, because then we're going to move on.
Okay. Thank you, and I agree with you completely, because I intentionally want to tell stories that people care about. I don't want to be disrespectful. I don't want to be selfish, because if you're writing an autobiography, you are saying that you should care about my story and my experience. So in writing fiction, I am portraying the experiences of others who may or may not be able to relate to the book, and I'm very conscious of being inclusive in the types of experiences, the types of emotions, the types of feelings, and also making sure I'm keeping people entertained. You know, books are expensive. It's really disrespectful to write a terrible book and market it and expect people to spend 300 Rand on it. It's the height of disrespect.
Thank you. Thanks for that question. Thank you. Thanks for the sentiment as well. Sven.
This one's a short and very sharp question. What's the best compliment you can receive for your work?
Alistair?
Mine always sounds like it feels. I feel like this sounds quite like. Is it masochistic, sadistic? Anyway, but when someone tells me my book made them cry, then I feel like I've achieved what I wanted to achieve. I think. Because I guess any kind of feeling, any kind of emotional response is what you're after, right? Yeah.
Nikki?
The best compliment I've had so far is I did a
Not your husband, please.
No, he doesn't give me any compliments. on my writing, that is. I did a TV interview, and it was like very formal. You guys have probably done them, you know, and it was like, so tell us about your book. And it was all very formal and like sticking to the points. And afterwards, the interviewer, she sent me this voice note, and it was so unbelievable. It's the best thing I've ever. She just started telling me about all the people she'd lost in her life. And she said, I couldn't say it on air because it would just be too much. And she started telling me about the circumstances in which she'd lost people. And she said, I don't know why I'm telling you this. I just wanted you to know that because my book is about death and dying and how we're all terribly afraid of that happening at any moment. And it was amazing to get that feedback from her, just that she felt this urge to share something very, very personal, and she didn't have to go further than that. I understood why she was telling me. Yeah, that was the best thing.
Again, I feel we could move on, but we have 3 more hands at least. So yes, Helen.
Hi. I want to know, just to take it back to the topic of the thing, and that's not because I've not enjoyed this conversation. It was a brilliant panel, thank you. But when you're writing about different people, and we're talking about privilege, is it a tick box that you go, okay, I've got a rich character, now I need to deflect with a poor character, now I've got this, now I need this. Like, is it a balancing act? And when you're writing, do you sort of keep track of which you're touching on all the classes, or is that just a mechanical way of explaining writing? And does it come more natural? And are you aware of representation while you're writing?
I think Zibu and Alistair, let's do you two, and then I'll catch you with the next question, Nikki.
Okay. So while I am conscious of representation in my books, I am also conscious of not making it a mechanical process, because the moment you start with the checklists, it will read like you wrote a book with a checklist, and then your story doesn't carry as it should. You can't really convey emotions on a checklist, like, okay, and cry, because nobody lives like that, nobody behaves like that. So I write as a form of interaction. I write conversationally. So when you read my book, it's like me literally sitting in front of you telling you a story. So the moment I add checklists and that sort of thing, I feel like it takes away the personality of the book and the intimacy of the reading experience.
Alistair?
I mean, that was a great answer. I agree. I don't think a checklist makes sense. I do think in South Africa, because we are such an unequal society, it's hard to tell a story where you don't have various levels of privilege in some of your characters, maybe it just feels more instinctive to me if I feel like I'm only writing one perspective, and then it feels like it's missing something. So then I do think, okay, I need another perspective in here, and I suppose the slightly mechanical aspect of this is that, there's that thing about comedy that you should never punch down, only punch up, like only make fun of people in a higher position than you. And I just think that in writing in general too, that you should just take much more care if you are a privileged writer writing about a less privileged person. I'm very conscious then of taking extra care to make sure that the characters are very well-rounded and full human beings and not caricatures. Yeah.
May I engage in a small vanity and add to that? That also when I'm writing, and it's really in the second and third phases of the draft, and when I'm editing, I think, this doesn't feel realistic because actually I interact with every kind of South African on a daily basis. And so when you get into those, when you create a world that's exclusive in any kind of way, it's actually fake. And so I think it loses the authenticity. And then I might go back and I might try and rebalance what I've done, if that makes sense. So, and so it's not so much a thing of ticking boxes as being, this is not authentic, if I may. Okay, question. There we go. Nikki, this is yours.
Oh, God. I would love to talk to Nikki, but I will. But
I know you will.
But my question is actually for Alistair about, and it touches on the mental health crisis. And I was interested in your bringing in now about talking about an anxiety disorder, and made me think about my own writing, which is informed, I guess, formally by attention deficit disorder. And I wanted to sort of ask you, to what extent do you think the taboo about mental health has arrived at a place where South African readers are ready to engage in something which perhaps reflects their own unwillingness to look at their own? I find it interesting and a relief to read about it, as opposed to maybe the conversation being entertained globally around people addressing it more freely. And is there, sorry, it's very long, a difference between, I think, the acceptance of it as a mechanism within a plot and a writer's kind of whatever, as opposed to, because I know that your book, I've seen it being read elsewhere, and quite a roundabout question. I hope it makes sense.
Thanks. Yes, makes sense. Just give me one. So it's Nazim. Are there any other hands? Okay, I think we can do two. I think we can do Alistair, because I do want to get Nikki back in before we round up. So.
It's fine.
No, just I think we all get to, and I did answer a question as well, which I shouldn't have done. So, Alistair, that was for you.
Must I answer? Are we
Yes, you must answer.
Okay. Thank you for that question. I think we're quite a traumatized society, and I think we have a lot of mental health problems in South Africa. So I think it's wonderful that it is. I do get the sense that people are more and more willing to engage with it and more willing to read about it and want to speak about it. Of course, as a writer who's written a book like this, I suppose the people who usually come and speak to me about it are the people who've appreciated that and enjoyed it. And I'm sure other people are like, "This is rubbish. I don't want to engage with this." Although I did get a review from an older person who said he just wanted to tell the main character to get a grip and pull himself together. So I think there's a generational dynamic happening there. I think maybe younger people are more willing to speak about these things. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to also, but now I can't. Sorry. Another time. Nazim.
I don't necessarily have a question, but I have a comment to make.
Yes.
On your original opening, I think, Carol Ann, and I think the first question. So I work in public libraries, and I think while writing is a privilege in South Africa, I think libraries are starting to feel like a privilege in South Africa. I think it's always been a privilege, especially public libraries. But I do want to give a shout out to the authors on the stage, and I want to say I work in a really privileged position called acquisition, so I deal with the buying of books in the city. And I want
this is why I know his name and his face, people. He works in acquisitions.
And that's why I want to say to all of you, thank you for writing the books that you do. Thank you for writing different things. Thank you for writing new things, because I think our librarians are starting to see, but you know, there's actually a lot in local fiction that is actually worth celebrating. And so my comment is more as a shout out to all of you to say, well done.
Has you the nicest audience, such moving things. That's
and
lovely.
continue doing so. because I see the uptake in terms of what librarians are buying, and in turn exposing our public to. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that lovely comment. Can I do one more question? It's 11:01. Can I do the final question?
I'm just going to follow on with the gratitude that this person has expressed. So I work in the mental health field as a counselor, and so I'm often speaking to people who are struggling to find the words for what's happened to them and what they experience. And I find myself often recruiting the work of writers, not psychologists, because writers are so good at giving the words to help someone make sense of what they're feeling or going through, what's happened to them. And so thank you.
Lovely.
You've probably helped a lot of people who you haven't met. And I think that's what writers often do, is send something out into the world and don't know who their work lands up with. And it's very helpful. So thank you. Keep writing.
I'm now going to, on that lovely note, thank you so much, because to be honest, all of us and every writer, we didn't complain, but we don't get paid on the other hand. So, let's leave it at that. But thank you so much. Thank you for the lovely comments. You may purchase the novels downstairs if you don't have them, and the authors will be available. Thank you so much to the sponsors. I don't know who they are, but there are several of them. Thank you so much for coming at 10 o'clock. I'm never dressed and made up at this time of the day. So thank you for coming and doing this with us. Thank you so much to you.
Thank you.